Morning people, welcome back to F Politics. Today marks 9 years since the EU referendum in 2016, and given everything that's happening in the world right now, the fact that we've already got an active war happening on our continent in Europe that's been raging for the last 2 years, the fact that Israel attacked Iran, which prompted Iran to attack Israel, which then prompted the United States of America to bomb Iran, and now Russia, a close ally of Iran, is telling Trump that they just opened Pandora's box. Under these circumstances, I feel like it's important to remind you of what Boris Johnson said during the Brexit referendum campaign 9 years ago.
I think it very, very curious that the Prime Minister is now calling this referendum and warning us that World War III is about to break out.
Because it was a regular attack line from the supporters of Brexit that the people who opposed Brexit shouldn't be believed because they're just scaremongering, they're Project Fear. They're telling everybody that if we leave the EU, it'll lead to World War III. Now for starters, the World War III warning didn't really come from us. He made that up in response to then Prime Minister David Cameron saying this.
The EU is one of the institutions, one of the organisations that has helped bring peace to our continent.
Now, before I agree with David Cameron, I should say that I hate David Cameron and what he did to this country, but Brexit was like an acid test for politicians, whether left or right, showing whether they could look past their own political views and see, oh no, that's objectively going to hurt the UK, regardless of what kind of UK you're trying to build. But David Cameron doesn't get the points for that because he's the one who called the referendum in the first place, knowing how damaging it would be. But back to the point, he is right because the EU originally began as the European coal and steel community, the basic idea of which was, if the coal and steel industries of the various European countries were all interlinked, then given that coal and steel were at the time necessary resources for war, it would be materially impossible for those countries to go to war with each other. Whereas the whole idea behind Brexit and Trump in America is nationalism. Each country standing on their own, America first, Britain first. And if we're trying to figure out whether the nationalism that Brexit and Trump unleashed in 2016 made World War III more or less likely, then this might sound a little weird, but I'm going to need the help of Britney Spears as a control example. Because if you look at the number of times people have actually searched for Britney Spears since 2004, you can see how it kind of goes down over the years. So as the relevance of Britney Spears declined, so did the number of people looking her up on the internet. Now let's try that with World War III. Look there in the middle, that's 2016 when the EU referendum and Trump took place. And you can see that concerns about World War III have only increased since then. And if you think it's unfair for me to be linking Trump, the man who's currently destabilizing global peace, to Brexit in 2016, well, in 2016, just before Trump got elected for the first time, he literally called himself Mr. Brexit.
Well, they call me Mr. Brexit over there, so we'll see what happens. Because the people want independence. They're tired of taking in people from other countries that, potentially want to blow them up.
And in terms of how Brexit has actually affected our national security, what have we seen since the referendum? Well, many of us warned that Brexit would undermine the peace process in Northern Ireland.
The people of Northern Ireland voted against Brexit because they know it is a disaster for Northern Ireland. That Good Friday Agreement was made between EU members.
And since Brexit, we've seen terrorist attacks against buses in protest against the Brexit deal. Before the referendum in 2016, Europol warned that leaving the EU would make the UK lose access to intelligence about incoming threats. And since Brexit, that's exactly what's happened. The UK has lost significant access to security information about incoming threats. Then there's the fact that Vladimir Putin, a key piece in the World War III domino set that we're all currently watching, a man who is currently invading Europe, attacking what are essentially British armaments because we've been supplying the Ukrainians, actively supported Brexit, explicitly told the UK Prime Minister to deliver Brexit, funded the Conservative Party so they could deliver Brexit, which the Conservatives are now openly admitting to. Why? Because he wanted Europe to be as divided as possible for when he invaded. And the people who Brexit has given a platform to have been supporting Russia's invasion of Europe by parroting Putin's propaganda. Not to mention, some of us warned that if we damaged our trade with the EU by leaving the EU, then we'd end up having to lean more into our arms sales, selling them to bad countries, which would end up hurting thousands of innocent Muslims across the Middle East, and that might paint a target on our backs. Jeez, I can't quite remember who it was who said that. But anyway, now we have a government that has admitted that Brexit is damaging our trade.
Exporters tied up in red tape by a failed Brexit deal.
And so now their plan is...
That is how we make our country a defence industrial superpower.
Which includes selling weapons to Israel, the country that is currently at the heart of the global military crisis right now. If only someone had warned them. I would also add, and you can correct me if you think I'm wrong, that a pandemic is a threat to our national security, right? And our first line of defense against a pandemic would be the National Health Service. And given that during the pandemic over 200,000 people died in the UK, and every expert on the board says that Brexit has been damaging our NHS before, during and after the pandemic, with studies showing that the overall cost of Brexit to the NHS has been an extra 1,500 people dying per year. Again, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that's a national security issue too. Because even before the pandemic, in 2016, there was a test done to see how the NHS would respond to a pandemic, and it failed. And in the years where we should have been preparing for a pandemic, the reports show, including in the COVID inquiry, that a lot of the resources that would have gone to preparing for the pandemic actually went to preparing for no-deal Brexit. Then there's the politics of Brexit, saying that
I think the people in this country have had enough of experts
that we shouldn't have to follow the same rules that other countries follow, and that freedom and sovereignty is more important than anything else, which led to a government where the Prime Minister said it was okay to shake hands with COVID patients during an outbreak.
I was at a hospital the other night where I think there were actually a few coronavirus patients, and I shook hands with everybody, you'll be pleased to know, and I continue to shake hands. And
they failed to lock down on time, which cost an extra 30,000 deaths. Hell, Michael Gove himself admitted that Boris Johnson's brand of politics wasn't suitable for the pandemic.
I think the Prime Minister found these decisions difficult. It's not that he found decision-making difficult. It is that a decision to restrict freedoms in an unprecedented way went against his instincts and the principles that governed his political outlook.
And Boris Johnson himself admitted this.
there is an important difference between our country and many other countries around the world, and that is our country is a freedom-loving country. And it is very difficult to ask the British population uniformly to obey guidelines in the way that it is necessary.
But you're right, Remainers were wrong. It was all Project Fear. Brexit hasn't damaged our national security because it hasn't led to World War III yet. I'm Femi. Make sure you follow F Politics so politics doesn't F you. Have a great week.